Are we good to go? All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order for public safety, July 25th, 2019. Roll call.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Ensel?
Here.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Okay, so reports, number one, reports from department representatives and discussion with counselors. Who would like to go? Sure, yes, yes. If you want to present your information that you shared with us to our pre-meeting with the entire council.
Okay, sure.
Yep. So the members of the council requested basically activity reports from the police department. So Chief Ritter has assembled some information he's going to share with us, and I thought it would be a good time to ask questions about anything else or any other types of reports, or if this satisfies what everybody is looking for on the council.
So what you have in front of you is an arrest report summary for a week's time and a calls for service matrix that is for a week's time. So it'll detail call types by every category that we track, and those don't represent all of the categories that we track. If a call for service in a specific category wasn't requested in that week, it wouldn't appear on this report. But it'll detail the total amount broken into different categories and also by the time of day. The arrests are very plain and simple, what you would find releasable under the Freedom of Information. It'll have the date of arrest, the time, the location, the person that was arrested, and the offenses which they were charged. So the council had requested some information. The only one that I'm not able to provide at this point is a sort of a mapping portion of these. That has to do just with the technical nature of it. We aren't able to provide it at this time. Our hope is that we can in the future, but currently not able to supply that. So the one thing that we hadn't talked about was the frequency of these reports. So I guess which kind of frequency would you like these? Would weekly be a good frequency?
I think so. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think that we should have weekly reports because that's what we're currently getting from building inspector, it's what we're getting from the fire department. And otherwise, I mean, if we waited longer than a week, very likely we would have extensive reports that just might be so
Sure, I mean, in a
cumbersome.
week's time, there's a substantial amount of calls,
Right.
so, okay, I just want to make sure of that.
Okay.
Any questions on these that I can answer?
Well, I don't have any specific questions on these reports, but one of the other things that, actually, this came from Councilor McFarland, and I'm sorry that he's not here to ask the questions, but he also wanted to, and I don't know if this is something that you have the software or the technical, or anybody
If you
technically
ask
can
me,
do
I
it.
can answer.
He wanted specific information about violent crime versus drug crime, you know, like numbers in regards to that. Is that something that you can, what are the marijuana arrests? What are?
It'd be difficult to do that on a weekly basis. I mean, I could give you maybe a year's worth the prior year, just because there are going to be less of those. So, you know, you'll
Okay.
see there's essentially 350 arrests for the midpoint of the year. We probably will arrest 700 people for a year. Now, those range from violations to high felonies. But what what he's talking about there are very specific categories, subcategories of the broader categories. Can supply that, but it's gonna be, it would be better to view it on a year's worth, just to get
Like a year-end report?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
All right, well, when he returns, and, I'll ask him,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that could be something that you could supply on the night of the public safety meeting, in that kind of frequency? So that would be once a month? Or is that,
so I would have to know more specifics of
Well, on this,
what-
on this sheet, there is one of the categories is marijuana
Yeah, I see that one.
investigation.
Right, so I mean, that would be a specific call, but I wonder if they're talking about the arrest
The arrest,
component of it.
that's what he's asking for. Okay, I'll email him and then, to get his feedback, and I'll send that through the mayor.
Sure.
Okay. So I have some questions that came out of this livable community meeting. Do you want me to ask those now?
Feedback?
Jeff, you read my list. You think the questions I have are okay to ask? Because I didn't know, I know some of these things you want to wait until your committee is finished, and then they're going to make recommendations.
Well, no, this would be information that they would.
Okay, all right. So, one of the questions that came out of the meeting is about the noise ordinance with the college students that are going to be coming back in to town in a few weeks. By the time we have our next public safety meeting, they will have already arrived, I'm sure. They wanted to know how the noise ordinance is enforced. Is it simply complaint driven, so you only are gonna go to where there's a constituent phone call and a complaint? Or do your officers patrol and, their neighborhood, the various neighborhoods, and then with the windows down, they hear a noise that's beyond the perimeter of the property, get out and address it? So that was one of the questions they had. So
Okay.
is it complaint driven, or do you do it proactively, where the officers get out of the car and go to the residents and address it?
We do both.
You do both?
There was a long time ago, the way that ordinance was written, that it did not allow for proactive enforcement. It had to be complaint driven. I would say, though, the overwhelming majority of noise complaints are complaint driven, just because the sheer frequency doesn't allow us to meet that, with any sort of, any equality. So we don't address them proactively because we aren't everywhere. One of the things that we were able to do in years past, when we had different staffing, we would put bike officers out during the early part of the transition of college returning,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when there was a lot of proactive enforcement. But yeah, we're limited, but we try to when we can. But I would say the overwhelming majority is complaint driven.
Okay. Jeff, do you have any questions you want to ask Chief Ritter while he's talking about it?
No, not really.
Okay. Another concern that came out of the meeting last night is, when calls are made by residents, they're concerned that there's gonna be retaliation from the person they're complaining about.
Yep.
So do officers have to reveal who called, who made the phone call or the complaint?
We don't.
That's what I thought.
But
Should that be a request from the person making the phone call? Say, please don't reveal my information, or?
So we don't as a matter of practice. Sometimes what people think is that they're going to be shielded by common sense. If we're neighbors and I'm the only one that can possibly hear the noise and the police show up at your door and they say, who called? And you say, it's anonymous. We know who, you know who called. So it's not always the shielding of the identity that, some people are going to make assumptions, and they're probably right in a lot of cases. So we do honor the anonymity. I mean, that should be clearly stated. we don't reveal who called.
What I shared with them last night is, many years ago, there was the housing, the apartments behind my house were rented out to college students, and for a little while there, I was making phone calls every weekend, because the parties were spilling out onto my lawn, there were fistfights, there were, kids smoking pot underneath my hedge, things like that. And every time I called, I always said to the officer that answered, do not come to my door. Don't come to my door after you show up, so that you don't come to me to, so I
No.
shared that information
No,
with them
absolutely.
last
No,
night, so.
that we are as respectful as we can be with that.
Okay. So another question they had was, there was an arrest, and it was in the paper, from two individuals who were frequenting the neighborhood of the people that I spoke to last night. They wanted to know, is it possible to have a press release? And I think maybe you already do this in the police department, so I'm not sure if this happens, but can you do a press release for safety warning saying, there's some illegal activity going on in this neighborhood, and lock your doors or be cautious or anything like that? Because when the article finally hit the paper and the identity of these people was revealed, this woman I spoke to last night, she goes, oh yeah.
But couldn't that jeopardize part of the
So
investigation?
absolutely, you are jumping right to what my answer would be, is that if we can reveal information, we do, because we always have to weigh the integrity of the investigation to, is there an immediate urgency to notify people in the area? And if there is, we will, but typically, we're monitoring it very closely, that people, need to
Then it
trust
just
that
shifts
we're-
to another area and you're back to square one.
Right, or,
Okay.
just, when those circumstances do permit, we do. We don't do a lot, because typically the investigation, it could be compromised.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Not from me. I don't know if anybody else has any questions? No? Okay. All right, thank you so
Thanks, Chief.
much. I appreciate that.
Did we want to do parking violations bureau report?
That's already part of our packets, but yeah, item 1, report from the
Yeah.
Parking Violations Bureau for June 2019. That's all of our reports though,
That's all
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Chief Wallace, did you want to share some information with about the fire department with the group?
Sure. We can talk about the staffing, is that one thing?
Anything that you wanna, yeah,
All
so,
right, we're working on some different models for deployment, looking at that, looking at efficiencies, seeing where we can, operationally, if we can change things around, working on that. We're also looking at possibly doing a public safety consulting on staffing from a third party. So we're gonna look at that so that we have some data from a third party that would be able to guide us in the future.
okay,
We've got that we're working on. As far as that, we're still working towards special operations, streamlining things, and keeping overtime as low as we can with where we have control. Is there anything else specific that you're looking for?
only what you wanna share. Because we met last week,
Right.
and we had a very, very extensive conversations, and
Met twice with each.
yeah, we did. First, because I wanted to understand more specific things about the way departments are run and staffing and things like that, and then we met with the Chamberlain, who came in to talk about the budget. So, we had wide scoping conversations with both the police and the fire, and so I asked each of them to share whatever they felt comfortable sharing here.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've been working with our training, trying to streamline training. I've made every officer a municipal fire instructor. What that means is that they can go get an authorization to teach a state level course. That officer gets that, can come back and disperse it throughout all of our membership, and then you get a state certificate for it, which wasn't happening before. They all go on our transcript, so it's following standardization. Our driver qualification school is almost finished, and then we're gonna be doing qualifications, so we get more drivers, which will drive down overtime. So we're working in different ways. We're building systems, and they're all coming together right now.
Okay.
So that's what we're working on. Our special operations areas, which is hazmat, swift water, and confined space, those are coming along really well. So it looks like we're gonna be doing some cross training. There's some opportunities. We've been working with New York State Fire to see what we can bring in and how we can do this the most cost effective and disperse it throughout our membership. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything from the code enforcement office?
Nothing specific to
Nothing.
report.
Okay. Okay, number 2, agenda items brought forward from departments to be approved by the committee and recommended to council. Number 1, request from MLD manager Bill Tracy, PMLD bid number 2019-6-1, Protection Avenue underground construction be awarded to Northline Utilities in the amount of $541,925. Number 2, request that the mayor be authorized to sign the following with regards to the proposed Wilcox Dock Marina. Bullet 1, State of New York Office of General Service, or OGS, Submerged Land License Agreement, license number LUW02185. Second bullet, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Permit Agreement for permit application number NAN-2018-01231-UCO. And bullet 3, sign and submit the New York State DEC Notice of Intent to initiate project construction for DEC permit number 5-0913-00073/407. Number 3, request from Director of Community Development Matthew Miller that the mayor is authorized to sign a professional services agreement with Architectural and Engineering Design Associates, PC, for design, engineering, bidding, and administrative services related to the expansion of the city's Broad Street parking lot for a cost not to exceed $28,100. Payment shall be made from the parking fund. Does,
I'll move.
oh no, before you do that, I was gonna say, does anybody wanna talk about these
Well,
now?
you have to have them forward before I think you can discuss it. Under Robert's rules.
So you moved, I second.
Now discussion.
Okay, does anybody wanna talk about these now, or do you wanna wait until the meeting? I'm fine with waiting until the meeting. Okay.
Plenty of time, and we're almost
Yeah.
all here that are probably gonna be here unless Councilman
I
Farley.
guess I just want to know the involvement for Wilcox Dock. Is that for, to make it operational this year, or?
Well, so we've been sent the permit for DEC, that's been approved. The permits for OGS and for Army Corps, they're called draft permits. So they send us the permits, we sign them, send them back. Once they have signed them, then they are official permits. So this authorizes the mayor to sign those, we'll send those back. And then, once we receive the permits back from them, hopefully next week or the week after, then we can start working on construction.
So we're looking at a week's time for the process?
We looked at 2 weeks, but keep in mind, we've got more roads to pave.
No, I know, I mean, I'm talking specifically about this as far as the timeline with
Yeah, permits,
permitting.
hopefully within the next week or two, we'll have all finalized permits in place for the marina.
So all the language and approvals are there, we're just now at the signature stage.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a question on item 3. I read through the document that was sent to us, and I think it outlined the scope of the service and what it will cover. My question is, will there be oversight for ADA compliance? It's not listed specifically in that, and I didn't know if that's just an automatic thing that happens, but it's not listed.
Any new construction has to follow ADA compliance.
So it's automatic?
regulations. Yep, it's
Okay.
automatic.
Okay.
Yep.
And the Broad Street expansion gives you how many anticipated additional parking spots?
21 is the number that's included in the proposal. 15 was what we originally planned, so.
And by the way, the county has also been helpful in helping do the initial diagrams that made this a viable choice for us to explore.
I guess in regard to number one, I know, and is Bill here?
Bill's not able to make tonight, he's had a
Okay.
family issue.
No, that's fine, but I imagine that this underground, obviously the underground work would need to be done before any paving and so on. Do we have a timeline for that?
So I spoke with Bill, he expected to have the work done by the end of September and allow you all to get in there in October.
October to have it picked, okay. Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, old business. Does anybody have any old business? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to number 4, new business. I do have an item that I would like to bring up, and that is fire pits. So we had talked about this last week when we had our meetings. Between now and the next public safety meeting at the end of August, and I don't know how this is done, so you'll have to help me, Dean. I would like to amend our code to eliminate backyard fires completely. So that means it has to be written into a law? Is that how this works?
Yeah, right now they're regulated but permitted through the regulation process in our code.
So would that become a local law then, that would eliminate fires? And that would be
Yeah,
subject to hearing, right?
Like any local law is subject to a public hearing. Do you have specific language that you
No,
are anticipating, or just, I mean, it's a policy question, so
Yeah,
ultimately it would be up to the council whether or not they adopted it. I'm presuming you may get some pushback supporting or opposing that
There'll be
request.
pushback.
there'll be pushback, but I think it's worth
And
bringing it
there's,
up.
I also have to review whether there's any First Amendment or religious rights that we would not be able to prohibit.
Oh, okay,
So there's some other considerations as
Hmm.
well.
okay. I hadn't thought of that. And how would that work? Would that mean if there was a religious reason for the backyard fire, you would have to get like so if we went through and this became an updated law, and if you still wanted to claim religious or First Amendment, or whatever we say, would that be a special permit? How would that work?
Yeah, we'd have to dig into it. I mean, I haven't looked into that specifically. I was just thinking off the top of my head, some potential objections to that request.
Okay.
Certainly, common council can protect the public's health, safety, and welfare through this kind of regulation. So in a general sense, you can put certain controls on it. It's just whether we can have a blanket prohibition. We'd have to research that a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, as an alternative, right now, it's outside certain seasons that, we're in a, she can speak more to this, we're in a, in a dense area. So perhaps the answer is not that there's a prohibition, but that there's an active permit required before you actually light the fire. Right now, we have certain restrictions in place, and you wouldn't have to necessarily go to the police and actually obtain a written permit for the fire rather. So maybe the mechanism is more to make it proactive on the person who is intending to have the fire accomplish A, B, C, and D, whatever those restrictions or regulations are. And then if they can meet all those, then they can actually have that activity.
Okay.
But I think,
Versus right now, it's a complaint, more.
I think some of the majority of the complaints, I mean, obviously there's some complaints, people are concerned about the proximity to their property, and I know we have some,
So right now we have
some language in there about where how far the fire has to be
Yep.
from property lines. But I think the majority of the complaints are based on, number one, fear of safety, and number two, and it might even be reversed, it may be 1A, and that is smoke and respiratory issues.
Yeah,
And that's why our process is set up right now, where if you follow certain regulations, it's distance from any combustible material, the ember or ash capture device on top of it, some kind of containment system. That plus lack of complaint, you generally could have your fire. But if there's a complaint and we can't resolve it, then the local law requires the fire to be put out.
And that would be answered by the fire department or code inspector? Oh, police, okay.
Typically it'd be police because it'd be after hours.
Okay. Do you ever get any complaints about backyard barbecues?
I wouldn't be able
Yeah,
to answer.
just
It's gotta be one bad
curious.
cook.
Well, you know,
Well,
sometimes
slippery
if it's a
slope.
propane tank, you know, if you're grilling something that, like a rotisserie chicken or something, right? And so you have all that grease.
Flare up,
Oh
yeah.
my, oh yeah, that would definitely happen. Or if you don't put the propane tank on properly or take it off, you could have a problem there. Okay, so I have a question that I emailed the mayor about this, and I emailed you about this too, I think. We had talked about the software that you declined to pay for again because you said it was too expensive. For running a report, but I can't remember what the report was.
Are you talking about?
So, this was like a month ago,
Water.
was the police blotter, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
Right.
Right.
yes.
Okay, so you didn't renew the contract for, the software?
No, so the software, the version that we were using was no longer supported by the manufacturer.
Okay,
So without support, we have a brick. So it required us to upgrade the version. So when we upgraded the version, the specific script that was written by a third party to extract the data from our records management system to import to our webpage, the police blotter, that was just a patch. It was specific to that software version. When we upgraded to the new version, that script no longer worked. So we would have had to hire an independent contractor to write a script
okay,
or a license to import to our webpage. That was over $1,000. That didn't seem like it didn't seem that was a use. I wasn't willing to pay that money just for that one feature.
okay,
That was outside, the cost to upgrade to the new version was, very expensive, so that was the reason why.
okay, I remember that.
So, that is something that could technically happen, but it would be subject to budgetary deadlines.
We might take that up as we discuss Socrata too, because Socrata is triggered with our Munis system. I know the governance committee can look at it probably in a week's time in greater detail, but they mentioned that they do have developed other community special scripts to draw in additional information. So we can always talk to them as well and see if that is a capability we could adjust, bring in once we do the Socrata, or if we do the Socrata.
Okay. Okay, any other new business?
I don't have any.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, meeting adjourned. Oh, we gotta do roll call, sorry.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes,
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
okay, meeting adjourned.
So we can begin our work session then and have any additional conversation on any of the items that we just finished discussing.
Actually, I have a question for the Public Works. They just left. Yeah, you see that?
What was your question?
Well-
Maybe I'll answer it, or,
It has to do with the colored trash bags. So, we all know that, clear trash bags are what Public Works wants, sitting on the side of the road. So like, one of the constituents in my neighborhood put trash in a black trash bag and was very upset about it. And, I did explain to her that it has to be in clear bags, and she brought up a very good point, which is, if you go to your most local stores, all they carry are the kind of the opaque garbage bags. It's really hard to find clear garbage bags for your kitchen
I
garbage.
believe those are Casella's requirements at the dump. That has nothing to do with the city.
Right, but apart from some specific locations in the city, you can't find them just anywhere. So, I'm not even sure, I'm not even
That's a question for Mike and Mike.
I'm not even sure what we can do
I
about
mean,
that.
we can't force
Right.
a business to carry a certain item.
I know. That's what I said too. I thought I'd bring it up. I don't know. I don't know what to, I don't know how to answer her, honestly.
Say,
It is what it is.
The owner of the dump, the county, the Casella that manages the dump requires clear bags. Have to shop at a establishment that sells clear bags.
Yeah, they're very
Hate
few.
to tell you, they pick up my garbage, I don't even put them in a bag, the garbage.
Mhm.
Just, it's another bag, they take it, let it pile up, they just put it in the dump. That's the way we used to do it.
Yeah?
So I got in touch with Mark Dame, as you suggested, and he passed on some information to me regarding, how did he word this? The merit shop. I think that's the appropriate phrase for the opposing position of PLAs. So he passed on some information to me, and I reached out to an organization that deals with that. And then I reached out again to Dave Hoover and asked if he would be able to do a presentation next week. So, as soon as I get back to him, I'll,
Is that
I'll let
already
you know.
August first?
Yeah.
Yep.
Gee.
Coming up fast.
Mm,
So I'm working on setting that up. Just wanna let everybody
Great.
know.
that's fine,
Okay.
welcome it.
So I told him 5 o'clock, because it would be a presentation to the council, so between 5 and 5:30. Is that an appropriate time? Okay. That's what I told him.
I think a couple of you expressed an interest in working more on elaborating some of our codes and planning and zoning principles. I mentioned that Department Head Miller pointed out that we do have a grant to look at and revise our zoning. Maybe you wanna, could you discuss with the council just for a moment, the extent of what you think that grant would be able to provide us with?
It's a grant to study the city zoning code and also along the lines of a comprehensive plan update. So any zoning statutes that might be out of date for any reason, or any statutes that we have found in practice to be restrictive towards development, can be addressed as part of an overhaul of the zoning code as a whole. That's generally the gist of it.
The last comprehensive plan coming in 1999.
Yeah.
We have some room to, make some adjustments and catch up to the modern era. So,
Actually, they recommend doing comprehensive land use plans at least once every 10 years, so I think this, as you know, when you wrote the grant, this was overdue to get this done. So this is something, is any councilors or any committee of the council wishes to kind of take this on? It probably might fit in best with infrastructure perhaps, or governance and planning.
Maybe a rep from both, I don't volunteer.
Jeff, that sounds like a great job for you.
We did have the planning board nominate one of their own members as an unofficial liaison to that grant process, so.
Perfect.
Well, I'm gonna request a preliminary meeting about a couple of issues that will appear on the agenda probably next week, and perhaps that might be a time for Patrick and I to discuss, who might be involved in that kind of effort, and in cooperation with the infrastructure committee. Are we kind of segueing into council reports, 'cause
Sure, can do that.
yeah, I was just gonna suggest that, I had heard back from David Spoladoro, who had been the sales rep for OpenGov, and I indicated, the interest in the Munis components that were, budgeting and transparency software, and he's requested a meeting with Richard, And I think Jeff had some interest in both discussing the topic generally and then being informed about Socrata in more depth. But perhaps we can arrange a time, not necessarily with David Spoladaro, but together, so that we can review kind of where we are. David had sent an email, which I believe I forwarded it to you, Councilor Moore, indicating kind of point by point what he felt like the drawbacks were of that software. Naturally, he's a sales rep, but I appreciate the fact that he remains engaged. So I'd like to do that, and through you, arrange that.
Maybe something early next week, are you available?
Yes, particularly because I think you're entertaining some ideas about another meeting with Munis, right?
Yeah, we'd love to have you talk with them and
Right.
understand their capabilities.
Okay. And the other issue I have is just a report that the Plattsburgh Sustainability Task Force, I guess was in the news, had a meeting, and it was really nice to meet everyone, and we accomplished kind of the basic organizational matters. Ethan filled them in on the grant that is being written and will be submitted. And we set our next meeting for August 21st. No?
No, no.
Okay,
No, no.
shook your head.
There's something else happening that day.
Okay.
Sorry.
And we're going to be, while we'll be waiting for the results of the grant award, whether we will receive it or not, to go ahead with greenhouse gas emissions inventory and a climate action plan, we're asking the members of the task force to take a look at the Climate Smart Community Action Checklist, and I think the mayor has already kind of indicated what things we are on our way to accomplishing so that we can receive points for them from the Department of Environmental Conservation, but to set priorities and goals.
Related to that is you'll see a little hole right in the front of City Hall. That's where they're putting the first charging station.
Oh, first
Should be
charging
installed
station.
tomorrow.
Okay, that's exciting.
And I think that's with the assistance of that energy incentive program.
Right. We gotta be able to get points for that. Yes, points. That's what I said.
Any other additional reports from government strategy and city operations? Well, city infrastructure, Councilor Moore?
Doesn't have anything to do with this time.
Well, we are meeting before our next infrastructure meeting, right?
Yes.
We are going to have similar budget discussions with department heads as we did with public safety, so we've got those scheduled ahead of our next infrastructure
Yeah,
meeting.
I think they've all been lined up already.
Yep.
Perfect. Finance and budget, Councilor Kelly can't be with us tonight, and we all wish him the best, obviously. In the meantime, I believe the last department has submitted their proposals, and Chamberlain Marks is assembling all that data right now, and hopefully we can start looking at some actual numbers next week. And this is delayed a little bit into August, but we do very much want the Finance Committee and its chair to be as involved as possible, so I think that slight delay will allow us to include him. Public Safety, Councilor Gibbs?
Well, we just had our normally scheduled meeting. All items are forwarded from that agenda to tonight, so there's nothing further to report.
Plattsburgh Public Library, Councilor Anderson?
No report at this time.
And MLD Board President, Councilor McFarland, will be a little bit late tonight, but we do have an item on the agenda for the work they're proposing for Protection Avenue, which consolidates a number of transformers into one transformer that is also off Protection Avenue and off to the side. And I mentioned already, yes, that they are beginning to do their installations of electric charging stations downtown as well, starting right out in front, but they're also looking at sites in all the various off-street parking lots that CDO has outlined and is currently getting the engineering work done on, including County, Bone Lot, I think Broad Street too, if I recall, but I might be wrong there. We'll see all that occurring in the next few months.
How many total charging stations are we gonna have in the city?
Do you recall the number? I think it was 10, but I can't recall precisely. And they aren't metered. Typically, municipally owned charging spots can't be metered from what I understand, but we don't anticipate people sitting there using up an awful lot of power because of course there's usually 1 hour or 2 hour time limits.
Do we know what the average charging time is for like a full charge with
For
these
their charging stations and vehicle like a Chevy Bolt or a smaller battery
Prius or
Tesla,
something?
it'd be 10 or 12 hours for a full charge. A small Prius, which has a smaller battery, they'd probably be charged up in 2 or 3 hours on one of these locations. Any other additional councilor reports or comments you'd like to offer this time? Any items that you just felt you just wanted to talk about, we hadn't had an opportunity to talk about, more speculative? Or any additional questions you might have of any of the department heads tonight? Would you like to take a 10-minute recess then? And
Sure.
conclude it and resume again at just before 5:30?
Ethan.
Ready for me to sign?
So, he didn't give anything other than it was minor.
Yeah, it was
and
just,
you-
the
and
language,
you-
it was that form language change,
Right.
it was like reorganizing sentences and like.
Oh,
yeah.
so did you make those?
I didn't make, because he did that on the PDF, but
Okay.
it's something I can easily adjust, but it was nothing, I would have to.
You think that will be time consuming? All right.
Yeah, when I went through it, it's very doable. I think overall, he said, like I said, he's.
Jeff,
Good.
do you still want
Make those
to,
adjustments.
I just really, I hope there's
You
not
still
a
want
big
a door
old
tour
jam,
tomorrow?
log jam,
We still have for that?
applications going in.
No,
where do you
that'll
wanna
be the
meet
thing
and
I do
when?
first thing in the morning, so, we have till 4.
Right.
Tomorrow morning, there's a fan there.
Make sure if you go in there,
It's like between 3:30 and.
Right.
Right before, like,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
so
you know where SIP used to
that
be?
should all be good.
Okay.
And then I'll get,
Right next door.
okay.
I'll be here by 8:30 or so.
Resolution.
reach out, whatever.
I know exactly where
Right.
you're going.
She, she just sends
How
that to
about
you.
2 o'clock?
That's how I got the others.
Mentioned,
All right. Thank you, Ethan.
Well, we've already done that.
All right, thanks a lot.
Right? We've done that. How about we meet, you wanna meet his friend's business? Because I still wanna go to, I wanna go to Yum Sushi, I wanna go to Memorial.
You wanna see what views? I don't know.
Tony Myers has a business on Lake House.
Can you meet next week, Jeff?
yep,
Okay.
get it in somehow.
Alright, so 2 o'clock tomorrow. Did you get enough information for your group?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
pretty much everything that they wanted to know.
Okay.
Probably should be ready in a couple of weeks. So I don't know if they want to find out a particular committee meeting or he just wants to, wanna come in. So I still have to get up to. Seems like.
He's getting into his real business now.
Big one. Something in a Tesla is about 100 kilowatt hours, and 220 times, I think these will do 30 amps, so what's that, 6,000, 7,000 kilowatt hours, so yeah, 16 hours.
I think they have 2 or 3 times a year they Pat worked for the police department, just retired from the police department, city police. So I think he good working.
I had suggested that, when they're meeting with Glasgow, landlords. And
The
maybe
ones
somebody
they're
from the
installing are
council
about $2,500 a shot.
have
Of
a
course, we've got a
conversation
package,
about
subsidy for it,
what
but
the complaints are.
yours are probably not
Photographic
2,500.
evidence.
The problem is.
I have an electric car, so I won't actually be ever plugging in down here. But I just have a home unit. It doesn't have quite the amount of power as these ones do. But it's fine, if you charge it overnight.
Then we'll come.
Mine, only costs maybe $200 or $300. It doesn't need to be expensive. Mine's not commercial, it's residential. So if you're charging a whole week.
See, I think what happens, schedule something regularly.
And for 2,500, they actually get two
I think that's.
things to charge as well, so that's pretty reasonable.
I did ask Joe about, unannounced inspections. He can do them. That was one of the questions.
With cost.
Hmm?
With cost.
No, he said he could do it.
But no, but he said if with cost.
Yeah.
They can do it if he gets something from either the police department or the fire department that they've observed, but he can't just go into a home on their own.
No?
Well, he can go knock on the door, but the owner isn't required.
Yeah,
to
right,
come in.
so
one of your
there's the,
constituents
yeah,
if you'd
that's
like.
what I was going for. He can, if he's allowed. So, there's that answer for you. Right.
Yeah, right.
Before they took out the $60.
Sound Councilor Ansel.
Huh? What's that? I'm not gonna try and steal your seat.
I said, sit down, Councilor.
You're welcome to it, Jeff. That's the loophole is when you just pick up more properties. You do need to close it. I have 2 or 3 other people. Sooner or later, something.
Actually, Chief Wallace is one of the commissioners that are on.
You see that stuff in paper, it isn't common, but you know, company falls down, stairway falls down.
Well, this is an old city, and built especially in that corridor of the city. So many historic homes, you know when you're looking at the breaking off board. We need to be concerned about safety.
You know how much money goes into some of this.
So I'm glad we were able to get some of those questions answered. We can bring that up. When do you meet again?
Probably try to meet back at Coles Group, probably in a week. Hopefully start lining up presentation. We need our snow removal. I'll sort out once we have there's 3 presenters. Everybody took a photo. This is so long. It's gonna take 3 sessions, I think.
So
it's too bad, because some people are just stick on Pleasant Street, like an island. They live around all this stuff. They've been there so long, they saw a different neighborhood, they see it deteriorating.
It's so sad to me that the owner of the Hummingbird trying to sell the house. I just think it's such a charming little bed and breakfast location.
On the other side, great big old house, which I'm sure is beautiful. It's got architectural requirements. Really nice person who owns it. They're not on the side where they do the most things, but, you know, I think of them too. They really don't see it whole lot. They put up with that too. But there's right in the middle of those really two beautiful homes.
And there are a lot of beautiful homes on Court Street, I think. Well, you can just tell how they're old and just beautiful.
Well, that's what happens. When you get let go, and then it costs so much. And they're so huge. I mean, not everybody would want to live in a place that big. And it's so expensive to fix it up.
My sister's friend she owned a home right on the corner of Oak Street and Elm, and just enormous house. And she ran her business. She was counselor. She ran her business out of Look, like my house, it says right on the deed that I cannot own or operate a business out of my home. Oh yeah, it says right on the deed. I've never heard of such a thing. So anyway, she just couldn't keep up with the electrical costs. It was huge. It was like, I think it was something like 4,000 square feet. It's in this old home. Like it's one of these old homes, you know, they're drafty, and they need the upkeep. So she had the kitchen remodeled. She had this gorgeous, great big kitchen. No heat, no heat. I don't know who made that choice, but they put one of those gas heaters in the fireplace. Doesn't throw any heat. It's there for show, but it doesn't like create any heat source. Yep. So she let it go, and a couple bought it, and then they let it go. No, presumably the same reason they didn't let it go is what I would guess. It just was hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month to it. It was drafted over. Everything's hardwood floors, and all was gorgeous.
They must have trouble with pipes freezing in the wintertime because they had heaters in the basement. It wasn't finished or anything, but they had heaters all over down there, so I'm guessing they had problems with pipes freezing at one time.
Probably, yeah. I have a heater in my basement. I let that run all winter. Never had a problem. Never. And it keeps the electrical costs. It's just a small space. It's just a wall mounted here.
It heats your floors up. And
It does.
you don't lose anything because
It's coming right up.
the basement is well insulated with the ground and everything, so to me it's worth it.
Yeah.
To heat that and then
It
you don't have
absolutely
any
is.
problems.
I love that.
Oh yeah, that's some good tell. Somebody had partially fixed it. And then they looks like they gave up. The upstairs bathroom still needed some work. The kitchen was fabulous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful kitchen. No heat.
Yeah, it had that gas fireplace.
Gas fireplace, but it doesn't throw any heat. So you go in this beautiful kitchen, you're freezing. Because it was at the far end of the house, and I don't even think there was a basement underneath it. So that makes for cold living. You can't live in a house in the North Country with no basement. You can't, because you are never going to keep your house warm unless you got heated floors. But that was not the case with this.
The people that had it for a while, not the people that had it, the people before them, they like to decorate it Halloween. They had the best assortment of Halloween decorations I've ever seen. This mummy that came out of the barrel.
Could you you see if Rochelle's out there?
Wyatt and I have a tradition every Christmas and every Halloween season. We drive the city to look at the decorations, and he loves Halloween. I think he loves Halloween more than he loves Christmas. So we would always have to take a tour by that one, just to look at the lights. Oh, yeah.
That must have spent a fortune.
Well, there was a house on Cornelia that did the same thing. And then they really pared it down these last 4 years.
Okay, ready, let's begin tonight's meeting with our Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Counselor Armstrong,
Here.
Counselor Kelly, Counselor Gibbs,
Here.
Counselor Ensel, Counselor McFarland, Counselor Moore,
Here.
Just a couple of short announcements. I did mention a moment ago in our working group that we've started our first charging station right outside. So on your way out, I hope you don't trip over it, but should be complete the next day or two. And I think it's one of about 10 that'll be located in various parts, primarily at the downtown right now, but hopefully they'll be popular and we'll be spreading them out to other public facilities as well. And I read earlier this week a TV news article announcing the end of our road construction season. Certainly the DPW staff did an excellent job on Cornelia and South Catherine Street, but I just wanted to correct the record a little bit. We're just actually getting only warmed up. There's a number of streets that will still be done yet, including parts of Clinton and Stetzer and Walworth and Protection and Miller and Boynton. And if they find some more time on their hands, I wouldn't be surprised if they throw something else in. They've always done that in the last couple of years since we've really enabled and emboldened them to really lead the charge on road building. So as always, we'll try to minimize the disruption for the public. I think overall the public is very pleased when you manage to resurface 8 or 10 roads in a season. So thank you all for your work. That's all I have for now.
resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on July 18th, 2019 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Gibbs, second by Councillor Moore. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending July 24th, 2019 in the amount of $64,654.50 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Gibbs, second by Councillor Ensel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have in your packets your various reports from our city offices. And during work session, you also gave your additional reports for your individual committees. Are there any other additional reports you'd like to offer this time? Seeing none, resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered, received, and the written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Ensel, second by Councilor Gibbs. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondences or recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills honored by the Common Council for the week ending July 26, 2019 in the amount of $2,115,577.67 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Moore. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is an opportunity now for any members of the public to please come and address the council on items on the agenda. There are agendas available just outside the door. Seeing none, let's proceed.
Motion to remove item 7A from the table.
So moved.
Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the item itself.
Oh, well, this is the grant that we're required to have your approval to submit onto the Climate Smart Communities branch of the Department of Environmental Conservation. And once again, I'd like to credit the hard work of Ethan Denson and pulling this together. It was a pleasure to work with him. It's my first grant, and I think it's not his. So I hope you pass it.
And we'll be presumably submitting it tomorrow morning for part of the CFA process. There is a city share in the grant, but we anticipate that will all be done in kind.
That's
in
right.
the various efforts we've been pursuing anyway, because we also value an energy efficient and sustainable community and are working in those ways.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, that's something that should be clarified.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request that for the Common Council approves PMLD bid number 2019-6-1 Protection Avenue Underground Construction, be awarded to Northline Utilities in the amount of $541,925.
Moved by Councilor Ansel, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion. Again, something we discussed earlier in committee, and we've discussed this also in our various MLD committee meetings before this as well. Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves that the mayor be authorized to sign the following with regards to the proposed Wilcox Dock Marina. State of New York Office of General Service, Submerged Land License Agreement, license number LUW 02185, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Permit Agreement for Permit Application, NAN 2018-01231-UCO. Sign and submit the New York State DEC Notice of Intent to initiate project construction for DEC permit number 5-0913-00073, 00007.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Armstrong. Discussion. I'd like to thank Mr. Duran for all the work he put into getting these permits approved. Of course, we've anticipated this for quite some time. These will allow us to deploy the GE docks that the
We've had for some
councils
time.
have had for some time, purchased at a greatly discounted rate from GE itself, about 2 years ago, I think.
Mhm. More than-
And they plan to actually put the docks out and have them be used this season already. The permits have been approved. We now just are at the signature finalizing stage. So once I have permission to sign, we'll be signing tomorrow, and then the last regulatory body will be signing when they receive it, presumably as, given that they've issued the permits to us.
Have we determined kind of the formation that the docks will be used as far as?
Yes, yep. Yeah, that was all part of the permit process. So we basically took the docks, put them together in a configuration, surveyed them, pulled them out of the water, and then I drafted a map that was submitted to all the regulatory agencies as part of the permit process.
Now, at one time there was talk about keeping them in there and using a bubbler. Is that?
Yes, for the winter time, yeah. They'll be year round, they'll be in the
Okay.
water. Yep. Yeah, so there's less maintenance, so they're not pulling them out of the water, putting them in the water. So all the permits outlined, those will remain in the water for the entire season.
We anticipate this will make the Wilcox dock more attractive as well, more used. Obviously, it's a nice area. I think Rotary's invested a gazebo in that
Yeah, there's a
area
big
as well.
gazebo there, picnic tables. It's actually a really nice area, it's just very underutilized.
And I think we also, when this was first discussed, talked about cleaning up the Hart, was it the Hart
Yeah, the
track?
Healthy Long Trail. Yeah, so part of this will actually be paving a good portion of that Healthy Long Trail. So that'll all be asphalt pavement. At some point in time, we'll run some light bollards down that path, so it'll all be cleaned up. Clean up the end of the point, put some picnic tables out there so people can have picnics and stuff and enjoy.
Because I think there's some
There was
poison ivy or
considerable-
something down there.
I'm sorry.
I think there's poison ivy.
There is a little bit of poison ivy. We've been mowing it pretty good over the last couple of years. So I'm not sure. I'd have to take a walk down there. I don't know that the poison ivy is still there. But as we're cleaning this up, we will continue to mow it on a more frequent basis, so it'll eliminate that poison ivy.
We do have a sign warning the public, though, of that just in case, and apparently the best solution to poison ivy is for the city to maintain a fleet of goats. Poison ivy, but given that we don't have any goats on call right now, we haven't been able to get ahead of that one quite yet.
So, we had considerable flooding this season. Is that, going to affect the,
It won't affect the docks. What it will affect is when our season opens.
Okay.
For the most part, it lines up with our regular marina, but there
Okay.
are times when that portion is gonna be underwater when our marina is accessible. So it's actually built into our license agreement with the boaters that we have the right to determine when the season is going to
very
start.
good?
Any further questions? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Gibb?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves that the mayor is authorized to sign a professional service agreement with Architectural Engineering Design Associates, PC, for design, engineering, bidding, and administrative services related to the expansion of the city's Broad Street parking lot for a cost not to exceed $28,100. Payment shall be made from the parking fund.
Moved by Councillor Gibbs and seconded by Councillor Moore. Discussion?
And we said 22 extra spaces earlier.
21 extra spaces.
21?
And I just wanted to make the council aware, likely at next week's council meeting, this project will be rolled into part of a capital project. The reason it was not done this week is I do not have an estimated total cost of the project, including construction.
Okay.
But I wanted to allow them to start working on it.
And we did meet with the Financial Restructuring Board representative this week, and as you know, much of this parking expansion is being paid by Financial Restructuring Board, and hopefully by another grant that this group has applied for as well. We should be hearing about in the next couple of weeks. So I think at this point, we're pretty confident that that all the various costs of parking expansion will be covered by grants or other sources, and won't be any burden on the taxpayer.
When's the next parking? I'm sorry, this really isn't relevant. I'll ask it later.
Second Tuesday in August, which I believe is the 12th.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland, do you have enough information to vote?
I'll abstain.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
No capital requests at this time. Are there any resolutions for initial consideration? Any new business or additional council reports? Any closing public comments on any topic of mutual concern?
Maybe, you might see us out here tomorrow from 12 to 2. Might have a couple of kids out doing a jog or some sort of
Wonderful.
activity.
Excellent, thank you. Any other additional public comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Ensel, second by Councillor McFarland. Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Got here just in time to adjourn. Thank you, folks.
Couldn't have timed it better.
Oh my God.
We got some stuff to
Is
sign.
that really the time?
Really the time.
You get out of here. Dinner with my boy.
Oh, you want me to hit? Is there any other,
You take care.
He's doing it.
Bring them down.
Did you have a nice lunch at the Twisted Carrot? I saw you and Natalie
Yep.
sitting out.
Everything is signed, Beth.
For meditation weekends. That's
Ooh,
silent retreat things.
wow,
Yeah, I know. It's like
pretty.
intense.
Sunday morning?
As in short.
I'm a tentative, I'll let you know, Jeff. My son is flying in this weekend from Miami for the weekend. Let me know if you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Contact
But I can't play,
about.
I don't think I'll be playing tomorrow, I can't play Saturday, so I can't go 2 days without playing. I can't go 3 days, I should say, without playing.
Yep, I remember